Yeah, so I hit record. We're rolling now, and we are now, Daron, talking to the world, or the three people who decide
Right,
to
right.
check out this this video. So my name's Mike Kimball, and I'm talking to you from Fort Collins, Colorado, and this is Daron Larson, and he's talking to you from Ohio.
Hey
And
guys.
yeah, and we're just introducing this. This is our introductory podcast. This is the one that says what we're up to and why we're doing it. So we're
Great.
calling this Mindful IRL, as in real life. And what that means is that if you're interested in mindfulness, because it's a really popular thing nowadays, it's everywhere from corporate boardrooms to military training centers to, K through 12 schools or whatever. If you've heard about it and you're interested in it and you're wondering how it works for you, maybe you're interested in the same kind of things we are, because we've found each other. I think it was across social media, wasn't
Yeah,
it,
I think it
Darren?
might even been Twitter, right?
Twitter,
Isn't
yeah,
that
of all
it? Yeah,
places.
yeah.
Yeah, and here
Well,
we
and I was going
are.
to say that I think that what we found is somehow a compatibility through Twitter, which is interesting in itself. I think what we both stumbled upon was a similar interest in contrast to a lot of the what's being talked about on Twitter. So it feels like to go viral on Twitter, you kind of have to stir the pot and take a
Mm,
strong position, not very nuanced. And I
mm,
think we were both recognizing in each other's messages some similar themes. And then I think it was you who alerted me to your textbook that
mm.
you had written, and it seemed like I couldn't believe how much compatibility with my specific interest in mindfulness. I'll just say here, I think what's happening, I'm encouraged by the explosion of interest in mindfulness, but I think there's a lot of room for a lot more voices than there currently are. And I think it can be, it's like we could talk about sports, but that's so general as to not be helpful. It helps to narrow down what sports are you interested in. And this way,
Mm.
mindfulness is an aspect of maybe meditation. We can talk about that, but it can really narrow it down to some really specific aspects that make it mindfulness, or at least in my book.
Mm.
So maybe we'll use these conversations to kind of think about that and explore and clarify together what we're even talking about. What are we talking about when we're talking about mindfulness, specifically practical applications? How do I not just do something that requires a quiet room or breath awareness, even, but that what insights and exercises can I explore that I can bring to real life situations? That's what I'm most interested in. So,
That's fantastic. Yeah, and it's great. I don't know if how sensitive my microphone is, but I have a young border collie downstairs in the
okay.
kitchen who discovered a plastic trash can a few weeks ago, and now it's her toy, and she
Oh, great.
bats it around the room with great force and enthusiasm. And so that's, kind of, to me, that's really speaks to real life, right? And one of the things that I hear all the time, and that comes across, I don't, some of the people watching this might be familiar with Dan Harris's podcast, 10% Happier, and he wrote a couple of books, and they're always kind of wondering about how does this apply to real life, but how often are we actually talking about that?
Yeah.
And we can spend time on people that are high profile that are doing it as teachers or as celebrities or whatever. But what about just regular folks
Exactly.
who are trying to apply it to their daily lives? And really, the question that keeps coming up with so many people is, and you hear this from young moms who have little kids, and they're saying, geez, I want to do mindfulness because I'm stressed out, or I just want to appreciate my life more with my children and my family, and how do I find time for that?
Right.
And you kind of dance around the answers, because as you pointed out, Darren, so much talk is around the meditation part, and I think
Right.
that's a big part. But
Right.
I also think there's just the mindful living part that we sometimes forget to spend a lot of time talking about. So that's another motivating factor for our little
Yeah.
episode here, our whole program, is to
Yeah.
really ask the question, how can I be mindful in the midst of all the chaos of my life, and what does the chaos look like, and what does it feel like, and how do we navigate it in such a way that we're recognizing every moment, trying to recognize
Right.
every moment that that this is what it's like to be alive.
Right. So one thing that struck me is I came across something in a description, maybe a bio, maybe the bio for your book Ethno-Wise. So Ethno-Wise in itself can be a topic. My approach to mindfulness, which I call attentional fitness, that might be a topic that we
Mm.
look into. But I was struck by your calling yourself a contemplative anthropologist,
Yeah.
and because I have sometimes called myself a freelance contemplative. So could you
Love
speak
that.
a little bit to your how you came up with that title and maybe how people respond or how they
Yeah.
resonate with it or not? And then maybe I could talk about mine.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I am an anthropologist. I started as an archaeologist. That's how I trained as a research archaeologist, those many years ago, and so I teach in a university. I teach at the University of Northern Colorado, and I've been teaching anthropology for, I don't know, something like 20 years, and it's a blast. And one of the reasons it's such a good time is because students, people, humans in general, are curious about other humans, and we want to know how that kind of knowledge about, cultural diversity and all of the things that relate to being human, um, how they land for us in our everyday lives. And so when I was teaching anthropology, I realized that it's, for me anyway, it's a lot less about concepts and jargon and, preparing the next generation of anthropologists, and a lot more about seeing how these insights into just what it is to be human,
Hmm.
how they can position us to more fully live our lives, and find more meaning in our lives, and also to accomplish more with our lives, because we have this kind of awareness. And what does it
Okay.
even mean to cultivate that kind of awareness? I mean, book learning is cool, but really, is that what's going to do the is that what's going to
Right.
do the job, or is it our experiential aspect of just living in the world and processing that? So yeah,
Yeah.
I spent a bunch of years exploring that and kind of playing around with it and testing it on my guinea pig students, and that's, the book came out of that. But really, I realized quite early on that this is a contemplative process. And contemplative, and I think maybe you agree with this, Daron, contemplative is, in American society, let's say, is a little suspect, because it kind of has this sort of religious nuance
Mm.
to it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's true, if you look at different religious denominations, there's people who are considered contemplatives, monks and nuns, and
Exactly.
mystics, and all that kind of stuff. But actually, if you break down the word contemplative, it isn't really focused on religious mysticism. It's more focused on this attention, bringing your attention, kind of directing it towards something. And in the case of contemplative work, it's directing it towards your experience, the full, as John Kabat-Zinn has called it, the full catastrophe of
Right.
of living. And
So what would you
yeah,
say is yeah, absolutely, I totally agree with all this and I'm interested in it. And I'm wondering specifically anthropology, then am I getting it that you're saying there's the conceptual anthropology, which is fascinating in itself, but there's a kind of a cultivation of awareness or what is it that makes it cultural anthropology? What is it that includes both those parts? Or
yeah, yeah. So, you know, I mean, obviously, as a teacher, there are things that I have to teach, and I enjoy teaching them. But really, when I've met students on a real life level, I've noticed that students come in nowadays, and I think this is pervasive in society, with this desire to have some meaning in their lives, to
mm,
connect up to something bigger than just a homework assignment or passing an
yeah.
exam, or in the case of regular life for everybody outside of the university, it's finishing a project or doing something on time or paying your bills. There's something bigger, that we can connect up to. And the paradox of it, I suppose, is that the bigger thing is really just connecting to our moment to moment experience. We don't
Okay.
have to connect up to some kind of large cosmic, um, principle, but instead,
Right.
finally remember that we're alive, because we
Yeah.
forget. And so that contemplative part has been really important to me. And so anthropology and the contemplative go together because it makes more rich the experience of being alive.
Okay, and yeah, no wonder we're even talking, because as you're talking about it, it's so similar to what draws me to. Well, I primarily consider myself a mindful awareness coach.
Hmm.
I do teaching and I do speaking, but calling myself that seems to resonate the most with people. And I try to use an analogy. Whenever I can, I compare mindfulness practice to our efforts to get more physically fit. To use as an analogy,
Yes.
physical fitness doesn't have it's not freighted with as much of the spiritual or, like you said, religious connotations, which I find really helpful. But I used to say on my website, I describe myself as a freelance contemplative, and what I was playing with there, I had heard Karen Armstrong
Hmm.
uh, I think on Being, and she was referring to herself as a freelance monotheist. And I thought,
Yeah.
that's like what I think she's saying is she doesn't really identify with a particular tribe at this
Mm.
point in her life, but it finds some richness or something that's making her life more interesting or more meaningful, something in that category. So without having to pin it down. So I thought this is something. I was raised in Kansas in a fundamentalist
Mm.
Christian upbringing, which I actually valued and still value in a lot of ways. That's maybe a topic for conversation.
Yeah.
But when I found that I no longer belonged there or didn't feel welcome there and had to go kind of searching for where I did fit in the world, um, it I, and this was about the time I was in undergrad, where I started to really question certainty and literalism and absolute answers, and our
Mm.
tribe has the right way and your tribe doesn't. So I kind of ended up rejecting a lot of that literalism. And then when I later in life, after 10 years of working as a social worker,
Hmm.
and running into the fact that I was much better at taking care of other people than taking care of myself. I was looking for ways to take care of myself, and I discovered mindfulness meditation. Went on a silent retreat.
Mm.
Been practicing ever since. But I found myself really having a few years of having to navigate. Uh, have never considered myself a Buddhist,
Hmm.
and so being able to find what appeals to me about the practice without needing a new identity. Does
Mm.
that make sense? And so I think what I've discovered is that Buddhism tends to get a ton of credit for things that I think people are conflating contemplative practice with Buddhism.
Mm.
It's like in our world, in our American society, we kind of treat those as synonyms. But
Yeah.
I've discovered, and I'm sure you know, that every religious
Yeah.
tradition has contemplative practices, and when you compare them with each other, they're almost indistinguishable. What's different is their specific stories that they tell and the cultural trappings. But oh my gosh, the underlying thing is really about humanity, the fullness of humanity, and I would say some aspect of paradoxical or counterintuitive knowing that goes beyond conceptual knowing.
Mm.
So, and just to kind of summarize that, I would say, I would love to be able to call myself a freelance contemplative and have people know what that means. I don't know that
Right.
they actually do,
Right. You need a
but
bumper
it's
sticker, you know.
exactly. But for me, it just is saying I'm interested in connecting on our shared humanity. I think we have enough things in the contemporary world that seem about identity and what makes us different.
Mm.
And I think that
Oh
there's
yeah.
a huge room right now for finding common ground and being able to have different opinions, different subjective experiences, different beliefs, room for beliefs to change over time, right? I want to be able to have a room full of people exploring what's it like to have physical sensations and thoughts and feelings and the capacity to hear and see and think. And if if exercising your attention leads to a richer experience of your worldview or the absence of a worldview or your scientific, whatever it is, we don't have to agree about everything in order to use the same gym, right?
Yeah,
We
that's
can
right.
exercise and then we can bring the benefits of that practice, the fruits of that practice, um, into whatever our lives, our values, our choices, our relationships.
I
So,
gotta jump in and say, probably in the course of just the few moments that you've had there expressing your point of view, we've got probably 5 episodes
right,
right there.
which is right, exactly,
It's
right?
fantastic, and so I'll put it out to anybody watching this that the comments area of underneath the YouTube video are there for you to suggest topics. So if any of this, anything that we're saying or have said floats your boat or grabs your interest and you want to hear more, put that in there in the comments,
Yeah.
and we'll
Can we
plan a
add
future episode.
this intro? Can we add the link to your book and maybe the description of your book? Because I think if people saw the principles that you're looking
Oh
at and
yeah,
how
okay,
they
sure.
resonated with me, that might provoke some topics.
You're
So
right.
yeah, we would
Yeah.
really like to hear what people would like to talk about. I think we've also talked about how we would like to invite other voices.
Yes.
Uh, like you don't have to have written a book or have
Right.
years of experience to weigh into this conversation. I think uh, we were interested in exploring lots of stuff, getting more voices into the conversation, I would say.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
another name for this podcast or whatever this is mindfulness in the trenches,
oh
because
yeah, right. Yeah,
this is what we're wondering about is what does
yeah,
this look like in real life, and so many of the things that you brought up connect with my experience too, and for me, as I said in the beginning, I started as an archaeologist, and why that is a question that's sort of I've been pondering for many years, and I think maybe people can relate to this though, because there's that feeling of uncovering layers
yeah,
of what's there beneath our experience. And so, there I was out there, in different parts of the world doing that in the physical world, with a trowel and a brush and that kind of
yeah.
thing.
Literally, right.
Yeah, literally doing it, but also really this approach that we're talking about is really an excavation of the human condition, and we all are capable of doing it, and that's what I wanted to. When you said that really came clear to me. I mean, we can give the Buddha his due,
Right,
because the things that he taught were kind of a distillation and a realization of the capacity we all as human beings have for
right.
doing this kind of work. But as you say, it shows up in so many different traditions,
Yeah,
and so if you look at the neuroscience around it, we all have, every one of us has a brain that's capable of doing this,
right.
and we can cultivate it and we can grow it and we can become more fit in using it, and it's really a powerful thing. And so we can do it ourselves with a
Yeah,
little bit of coaching, a little bit of training. We can begin those excavations ourselves and open ourselves up to all kinds of discoveries,
yeah,
and that means not just on the cushion, as the saying goes, but also in our living of everyday life, surrounded by the 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 seductions and
right,
the distractions
right. The
and
competition for our
our
attention
attention, the
that we're swimming
competition
in
for,
right
yes,
now, right?
exactly, yeah,
Well,
that's
yeah,
right,
and what you've reminded me of, it's like what I'm really interested in, and this isn't a sexy
right.
tagline, but it's I think we have people don't realize the capacity they have for becoming more objective about their subjectivity,
Mm.
and that sounds a little dry, and actually sounds like a really big project. I think it's a lifelong project,
Hmm.
but it's full of surprises. When you said excavate, looking at the layers, when we peel back the layers and dig
Mm.
deeper, what fascinates me is when I just try to be more objective about my subjectivity, which is really hard.
Hmm.
Uh, it leads to things that's like connection to other people, compassion, like a slight shift in perspective that can reduce the suffering I'm having around some discomfort, or whether I
Mm.
feel lonely, or whether I feel like I belong, or it's interesting, just these really digging into what I think makes it mindful is real time subjective experience? What's it
Hmm.
like to have, what's it even like to have thoughts and feelings, and how do those react with each other? And how do I even know what I'm feeling, or how
So
am I aware of what I'm
let me
thinking?
ask you, Darren,
Yeah,
because in your line of work, this is so relevant. If somebody were to walk up to you off the street, or somebody were to put in a comment below our YouTube video,
yeah,
okay, this all sounds good. Subjective, becoming more objective about our subjective experience, and in the moment, outside of any kind of meditation, but just experiencing life.
yeah,
But how? What would
yeah,
be a suggestion you would make, or a little
yeah.
short set of instructions or something like that?
I would say in general, think about it's sort of like well, to me, it's always about coming back to our senses.
Hmm.
So so uh, if in real time I find myself doing absolutely anything I'm doing at all, being curious about what sensation, what thing can I take in with my senses? Can I bring my direct awareness to at any given moment? I had something else that was forming in it. I've kind of lost the thread of it, but maybe it'll come back to me. But it's oh, I know what it is. So if you think about it, it really is
It's real
it's
time,
taking
folks. Real life.
yeah. It's taking place. It's taking place. The investigation happens at the sensory level.
Mm.
And please don't get me started because I could go on about this. But we tend to interpret, we hear, we think, we assume it's about the situation level, but come back to our senses as if it's something, what does it, what would it mean to come back to literally come back to my senses right now? And approach it as one of my coaching clients said this, and I can't stop thinking about it. She said, what you're asking me to do, we were talking about feeling her feelings in real time. She said,
Mm.
it's like you're asking me to be both the scientist
Mm.
and the lab rat at the
Mm.
same
Oh,
time.
nice.
Like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
absolutely. So it's sort of like, what's it feel like to walk? What's it sound like to be in the grocery store? What does it feel like to be sitting in a red light? And I always tell people to aim really low. Come back to your senses
Mm.
more often than never and aim really low for a few seconds. Just soak in some sensory detail. And then to
Mm.
me, if you're doing that at all,
Mm.
you're in this experiment together.
Mm.
I have people I've been working with for a few years, and we get together like almost weekly basis. And what I love about it is we're comparing our field notes. We're not solving problems necessarily. We're changing the way we relate to our lives in
Mm.
real time.
Mm.
But when we compare those notes, they're not stories. And this is maybe
Mm.
we kind of
Yeah.
steer this to conclusion here, but about our next topic. But we're so used to experiencing our lives as if we're in a story,
Yes.
but when we stop to notice our senses directly, it's fascinating because it's not entertaining necessarily to someone else. If I report to you that I was at a red light and I stopped and I noticed that there was a little tension in my jaw that I was able to relax, and then I kind of enjoyed a few seconds of calm in my body while I was waiting for the light to turn green.
Mm.
It's not a There's no drama. It's almost like poetry. It's a
Mm.
poetic observation, not a so if we get
Mm.
together for lunch, we don't compare notes about these sensory details because there's no character facing an obstacle and having some resolution. It's just
Mm.
I heard a bird singing.
Yeah. Nice.
I
Yeah.
I I let my dog sniff the ground, and I just noticed I was starting to get anxious that I'm going to be late for work, and I felt that. These aren't
Yeah.
stories; they're just the substance of the human experience.
I love
So
that.
so
Yeah.
strangely, it's like when we get together and compare these notes, I think other people would think what's wrong with these people? There's no resolution, there's no story. It's not even interesting. But when someone says, you know, I got
Mm.
down, I noticed some movement and I got down and I just watched the ants on the ground. It sounds odd, but everyone in the room is just like, oh, yeah,
Mm.
like
Yeah.
captivated by, I guess, the opportunities we miss by having our attention anchored, this default narrative mode of attention in the story.
Mm.
Think of all the things that we're potentially missing that don't need to be dramatic
I
to
I
contribute
I,
to a satisfying life.
I love that because of course that introduces a bit of our next
Yeah,
episode because we're going to talk a lot about stories. And what I love about that, of course, is that everything, our whole society and our whole way of thinking is built around stories. And we're
right.
told to brand ourselves nowadays and to tell our story. And and everybody's got a narrative, and there's competing narratives, and all this
Yeah,
kind of stuff. And you can get kind of wrapped up in all of that and lose your core. You can lose that core. And that gets back to what you said. And I love this because you use an expression that has had meaning in our society for a long time: when you come to your senses, right?
right.
And so that can have two meanings, right? One is like you're unconscious and you come to your senses because
Yeah,
you were knocked down or something like
yeah,
that. And the other one means you're taking charge. You're realizing that you've been off track.
right. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. You're waking up to the fact
You're
that you were
waking. Yes,
heading off in a direction,
yes. And
right?
what's
And you're
what's great about you're offering us a third kind of a third kind of permutation of that, which is coming, because we've, even when we come to our senses, we don't know we've come to our senses,
right.
right?
No, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and so just actually touching base with the senses themselves
Right.
liberates us from all of the baggage that goes with thinking we have to know things, thinking that we have to do things a right way and we're doing things the wrong way, bringing all kinds of judgment to our experience. And that would made me think also of the stoplight or anything, any situation like that. In addition to noticing the redness of the light and the emotions arising in yourself, you're also going to be noticing your reactivity. You're going to be noticing your conditioning, the kinds of things that have always been there for you, that have been, driving you in some direction. So
Right.
why are these lights so damn slow to turn
Yeah, yeah,
green?
yeah. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I need to get somewhere because I am the lead actor in the movie of my life, right?
Exactly. It's all about
And
me.
so yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
feel, if I'm honest with myself, anytime I check in, feels like I'm the center of the universe. It
Yep.
does. It feels like it's
That's
all
right.
revolving around me.
That's right.
And yeah, you were investigating that. Yeah, gosh, there was something else there, but I think
Yeah.
I've lost it. But I
We'll
think we
pick it up
can
later.
maybe kind of wrap it up by saying let's dig into this story topic more in our next conversation, and we'd love to have anybody's. Is this interesting to you? Do you have questions about this? How do you think of the difference between story and what's it like to drop your story? And all that rambling, I just thought of the thing I forgot. I'm not talking about anything odd or esoteric or woo woo or unusual. I know that can be a disappointment to some people, but I think we come to our senses all the time, but you nailed it. We're not aware of our that we've come to our senses. It's almost
Right.
like it's not dramatically interesting enough to be something we
That's it.
notice.
That's
And
it.
one example is, I think this resonates with people. If you ever catch yourself taking a deep breath or noticing you're holding your breath and just sighing,
Hmm.
it's sort of like some part of your physiology is doing it for you,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
And you can
Hmm.
even just become aware of that as an entry point. I like to like find these natural things you might start to discover, like in my classes, if I'm giving ideas and people say, well, I don't do mindfulness, but I do this, and I think, no, 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 I'm inviting you to fold that thing
That's right.
that it's hard to talk about because it's so natural.
That's right.
It's just in the same way, I don't have to go to the gym to be physically fit. I do need to move. So if that's gardening or walking
That's
around
right.
the block, or then
Walking up
that's
and down the
taking the
stairs.
stairs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
exactly.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And so it ends up permeating every aspect, every corner of your life.
Right,
And that's
right.
where there's another topic for us, Darren, because we've both in our own way in the past talked about this kind of weird um, morphing that's happened to mindfulness as a practice as it's entered the
Yeah,
mainstream.
Yeah.
And so you end up with, the cover of Time magazine, and you've mentioned this before in a recent podcast. What was it? What was the name of the podcast? It
Oh,
was
Curious FM.
Curious
Yeah, Curious
FM, a
FM.
recent
Yeah, we'll put a
episode.
link on that too.
Fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
great podcast for anybody who's interested in hearing more about Daron's perspective and his approach. But in that situation, we've got, like the cover of Time magazine with a blonde white woman wearing a white
Right.
leotard sitting in a lotus position, and that's
Right.
mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, for those of you who happen to be blonde and white and wear white leotards, no big deal. But
Yeah, you're welcome
there's the
for the
rest of
party.
us,
Right.
who also cultivate mindfulness, but it's important not to keep them separate. Like,
Yep.
oh, there's this person in meditation on a beach, as you mentioned in the podcast, and there's a nice, wafting breeze. It's balmy. It's got a flavor of coconut to it, and there's
Yeah.
palm trees in the distance, and
Right.
and so you're escaping. You're
Exactly.
getting away, and then you leave the cushion or the pile of sand you're sitting on or your towel or whatever it is, and you're like, oh damn, now I have to deal
Exactly.
with life. I
Exactly.
can't wait to get back to my beach towel because I can't deal with the rest
Right.
of this stress. And
Right.
so what we're exploring here in our conversations is that no, actually, you're going to the gym when you're sitting on that beach towel, or sitting on a cushion, or sitting on a chair,
Totally.
or riding the subway, bringing attention to your breath or whatever it is. You're doing some fitness training, but at the same time, the reason you're doing it is to engage with the world and bring
Yep.
mindfulness to absolutely every moment, if you can, of your experience.
Yeah, I think that's where we connect so much, is that I'm so much more interested in the gritty real
Yeah.
life application
Yeah.
and turning anything into an exercise.
Yeah.
It's a game changer. It doesn't have to add extra, you don't have to subtract time from your life to do it.
Yeah,
And you
that's
certainly
right.
don't need the conditions to be perfect, which means busy parents,
Yes.
busy people in general.
Yes.
There's a way to strategize, and we can come up with something that you can do. The tricky part is it's not hard. The tricky part, you're already doing something like it, but bringing it into your conscious awareness and maybe strategizing, setting yourself up to succeed. So,
And maybe there's an opportunity here for this podcast too, where people, if you have viewers, if they have any questions or suggestions, we could do a kind of what would it be, a freestyle where
Yeah.
we kind of address different topics, different concerns, and then come up with a practice
yeah.
to explore those issues.
Yeah, and I'd love if we started getting enough interest, if we had some way to do like taking questions live or something,
Yeah,
if we got
that would
enough
be
of
really
an audience.
cool.
We would need an audience first.
Yeah, right,
But
right.
who knows if that's going to happen.
Right. We'll
but-
see.
But in that direction, so we're going to put some links up. Maybe some questions or interests have been sparked, and you can weigh in, let us know. But next time, what we're planning to talk about, I'm curious how you think of story when it comes to your anthropology work and what you talk about. And then I love talking about what I mean by a personal narrative or the default mode, attentional mode of narrative. So we can kind of have that be the theme next time around. We'll just talk about that as in any direction it takes.
Yeah.
But I think that's what the plan is, and then we're going to start brainstorming a list of topics that we're interested in, or that you let us know that you're interested in. So
yeah, and there's things we encounter every day, the current affairs that are going on around us, and also new discoveries in science, and
Yep.
and arguments that people are making about how we're supposed to be, and all that kind of stuff. All of it's fair game. So we'll
Totally.
based on interest and how excited we get about these topics, who knows what the next one's going to be.
That's right, and I especially with your anthropology focus, I'm really interested. This will be kind of my last comment, so you can wrap up whenever you feel like we're done. But I'm just full disclosure, I'm not a team sports guy. I don't have strong affiliations with teams, and I think it's actually helping me to navigate some of this political polarization, because I'm stepping back and watching it as a dynamic, as a cultural dynamic. And I think it's safe to say that you would agree that you and I are not interested in taking in sides at all, but really picking apart what makes it so challenging right now to find common ground with people who have a different perspective? I'm interested in that question in general.
Hey, there's
A bird,
some more real life.
real life. I had a bird, I think, but it didn't get in. I mean, it flew off, but it activated the dog. Um, but I'm really interested, and I think this is I think there's more and more voices uh, who are exhausted by this fight,
Mm,
and maybe there's an opportunity to start having the difficult conversations that I keep thinking of it in terms, I'm really not interested in your 100% certainty.
mhm.
It's just not interesting to me.
Right.
I'm interested in the things you're uncertain about.
Yeah.
And if we're honest about those things, there's a lot we can talk about. A lot of really important things that aren't getting discussed
Oh, wow.
apart
That's
from
great.
politics, apart from religious
That's
beliefs,
right.
apart from all the things that divide us. So we're going to do our, I think I'm going to do my best. I try to, anybody's welcome as long as we have this guideline of we're interested in the dynamic of what's it like to be a human being, what's it like to be a human in groups, uh,
Mm,
to navigate our stories, our personal stories, our collective stories, but maybe in a way that is leads to connection,
mm.
not the kind of predominant sort of anxious isolation that I think we're sort of falling into collectively. So
Beautiful.
it would be interesting to see if we can pull that off. If
I
we
love
can't,
it.
I think
I
there's a
love it.
huge need for it. So
Yeah, and to sum all of that up, it would be, and I think both of us share this interest in exploring discomfort, right? And in
absolutely,
some way
yeah,
finding comfort in discomfort,
yeah,
because that's how we get to know who we are, who we really are.
yeah.
So maybe we should end there, and
That sounds great.
I hope whoever's watched this has enjoyed it, and I look forward to the chance to have more conversations with you, Darren.
Yeah, same. Looking forward to it. Take
All
care.
right, bye.
Bye.